Pranams and namaste to everyone. And I always begin speaking about the Vedas because of my very light complexion by honoring the gurus who came before me. So Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshvara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Omagana Timirandasya Ganangana Salakaya, Chakshurun Militam Gena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. And as you know from the Bhagavad Gita, Yad Yad Acharati Shreshtas, Tatad Eve Taro Janaha, Sayat Ramanam Kurute, Lokastad Anuvartate. My Sanskrit name is Kavindra Rishi. I don't claim to be a Rishi. The name was given to me by my Jyotishi guru, so no presumptions there. But it is my goal in life to represent the Vedic knowledge to the entire world in the clearest possible way in the English language. And though I know some Sanskritam, I am not Panditji. I know what Pandit is, and I'm not Panditji, or Pandita. But I am a diligent pursuer of the Vedic wisdom and proponent of it in the clearest possible English. So since Ramji introduced the topic, which is to discuss our recent publication, which we worked on for 10 years, of the Bhagavad Gita, called The Bhagavad Gita Comes Alive. Now, you should immediately be thinking, do I think that I know more than the many great acharyas who've already translated it? And the answer is, oh no, nowhere close. But all of the great English translators, many of whom were very articulate and elegant representatives of various lineages, all of them were doing that during the era of colonization. And I come from post-colonial times. So when this knowledge came to me, I asked myself, what could I do to be of use? And sure enough, right away, my guru used me as an editor and proofreader on his translations. Because his Sanskrit was better than mine, but my English is way better than his was. And I would say this to you as a premise. I know less than all the Sanskrit Panditas around the world, and I bow at their feet. But when it comes to English, they can't touch me. I'm a 99% English user, and they're at about 65, maybe. So this is where the problem came in. So meditate on this for a moment. That colonization lasted for a certain amount of time. And during that time, it was this completely imperfect, crazy language, English, that dominated the culture with the most perfect language ever presented to humans on earth, Sanskritam. It is the scientific language from which Greek, and the Greeks hated zero, so they're not really scientists, and the Romans, even worse, try to do your taxes in Roman numerals. So clearly, the scientific knowledge and the great wisdom that's been circulating the world did not come from the Greeks or the Romans. They each made small contributions. And Rome eventually became synonymous with the Roman Catholic Church, or as one of my professors of history and comparative religion used to say, the Roman Catholic Church is simply the last vestige of the Roman Empire. It is a colonizing organization. So it's very important for everyone who's been colonized to know that that colonization was set in motion by the Pope in the Catholic Church by papal bulls a little before the time of Columbus. He gave Europe permission to go around the world and steal everything from anyone who wasn't Christian. Their land, to enslave them, to take everything, and in the process of so doing, they denigrated those cultures, disparaged them, lied about their origins, lied about their wisdom, and this was especially the case for Bharat. So this is when I come into the picture during the 60s. And what's happening is, you got to know, what goes around comes around. Bahunam janmanamante, jnanavan mam prapadyate, Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Samahatma Sudurlabha. Chapter 7, verse 19 of the Bhagavad Gita. After many, many births in the pursuit of jnana, one finally comes to the conclusion, Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Samahatma Sudurlabha. So this means that in this last 50 to 75 years, I was 75 on my last birthday, Atmas came back, reincarnated in the families as the grandchildren of the colonizers. We came back to resume our yoga. But we came back inside the civilizations that were the colonizers. After all, turnabout is fair play. It's only fair that we came back inside the cultures. So the first thing I did, and we, like me, those like me did, they were born Christian or Jewish or Catholic or something like that. And they looked at their religion and they said, well, you're all nice people. You're not hurting anybody now that I can see. But, of course, we didn't know about colonization. But we said to them, you can't answer my questions. I've got all these questions. And you don't seem to have much philosophy. You have mostly blind faith religion. And I put forward to those listening that that is the basis of Western civilization. Blind faith religions with some truth. Not to be disrespectful to them, but they're not philosophical traditions. In fact, of course, the Christians and Muslims were known for at least 1,000 years for burning libraries and disparaging knowledge and only promoting faith. We can't say it otherwise. I have friends from all these traditions, but I have to be honest with them that your ancestors really messed up. They did things in the name of Allah or the name of Yahweh or the name of Jesus that were despicable and horrible. Now, I don't consider that the real representation of those traditions, of those religions, but rather something horrible done in the name of them. So with that clear, I can say what I say about them because it's not about the current practitioners who are sincere, because you wouldn't have colonized. But what I have to say to you is, before our translation of the Bhagavad Gita, which just came out this year, every Bhagavad Gita I read, and I'd read about 75 or 80 of the translations, including my own guru, were filled with Christian words: God, sin, soul, heaven, hell, etc. Words that should never be inside the pages of any Vedic text. So this is the first thing I did. I simply took all the Christian terminology out of all the translation. Not a single word of Christian terminology is in this translation. That's radical. No one has done it so far. And therefore, in my opinion, what this should stimulate is a committee of Sanskrit pundits and English top-end poets and lit persons like myself working as teams to correct all of the translations done during the colonial era. Keep them, but clean them up. So in my process, the first thing I did was take out those words that should never have been there. I call that the decolonizing step. There's no other way to say it. Dharma is not religion. Religion is religare from the Latin, and it means bound by rules. Just like the bones are bound by ligaments, religare. So it's a legal system of rules, and it's a rule-based religion. And that's the Abrahamic religions. They are rule-based. So they deserve the term religion. But the Vedic Dharma and the ways of the indigenous people of various places are not their religion. If you say that, you're simply ignorant that the two words are inappropriately paired. So one more thing, every Bhagavad Gita translation that I read had two mistakes: a word-for-word translation of the Sanskrit, and you already know what I'm going to say. There is no one-to-one equivalent for very important, deep-meaning Sanskrit words. There is no English equivalent or synonym to Dharma, nor is there for samsara, nor is there for prakriti. Material world isn't prakriti. prakriti. Prakriti means something very specific. And all of them have roots that have multiple levels of meaning. So, with that in mind, there is no word-to-word equivalence in this Bhagavad Gita. And I did not do the Devanagari because it's too much for a beginner. The first thing to get them to do is to understand the meaning of the Sanskrit words, and they must learn at least 100 Sanskrit words to have a new vocabulary to speak what they learned in the Bhagavad Gita. So let's say one thing first. This was given by its own admission at the tail end of the Mahabharata, about 7,000 or 8,000 years ago. Look for Nilesh Oak's work, who's done some marvelous research on the 250 astronomical references in the Bhishma Parva of the Mahabharata, proving that with a solely lunar calendar, technology today and computers can pinpoint the historical moments that are mentioned in the Mahabharata. There is not another culture that has any literature that has astronomical observations in large numbers that you can pinpoint with a computer, that you can back up and see the sky at that moment. But with the information in the Bhishma Parva of the Mahabharata, this book was spoken at a precise moment in history, and that precise moment was quite a long time ago, longer than Christianity, Judaism, or Islam claim to have existed. And there's astronomical proof of it. So now, having taken out those colonizing words, the next thing was to delay introducing the reader to the Sanskrit words in the Sanskrit alphabet, because they're not going to learn it and they're not going to pronounce it phonetically correctly. So all that's in there is the transliterated Sanskrit, but that is in there. And then the verse in clear English with no words that cause conflicts. So now that's another step. Neutral English that doesn't prejudice the conversation. And for that, you have to become an etymologist in English as well. Let me just give you one quick example. If I asked you what the word God means, you wouldn't know. First of all, you wouldn't know the usage dictionary's standard term for God, meaning for God, because the dictionary makers didn't want to step on the toes of the Christians. So they would put something in there. If you ask what is the actual meaning of God, you will not find a human being in North America that can tell you, unless you happen to run into another etymologist. But I never heard anyone but myself say this. So here it is. The word God came through German, and as you know, German has a Sanskrit basis, not Latin basis. So it was first a Sanskrit term that occurs 4 times in the Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 4, verse 24, chapter 9, verse 16, chapter 11, verse 19, and chapter 17, verse 28. But you know it as this: Brahmarpanam, Brahma Agnau, Brahma Hutam. Hutam became Gutam, G-H-U in German, became Gut in Dutch, and God in English. So are you ready? God is the smoke arising from a pagan fire sacrifice. Now you should be laughing. We believe in God. You mean you believe in the smoke from a Vedic yajna? No, that's worshiping gods and idols. But that's your word. You were so illiterate, you didn't have another word. You took our word, and you took a third-rate word that's describing the yajna, the fire sacrifice that you declare is a sign we're pagans. So you're using a hand-me-down pagan word as the name of the ultimate supreme being. My friend, you are truly illiterate. I am blowing the whistle on Western illiteracy when it comes to these words. So one more for you. Lord. What does Lord mean? You know, you won't find a translation that doesn't say Lord Shiva, Lord this, Lord Krishna, Lord, 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 Lordy, Lordy. I'm tired of hearing Lordy. So what does it actually mean? Again, you haven't got a clue. It is a word from Middle English when England was, say, 500-600 years ago. And the word is haflard, haflady, Halfard. So it's hard to pronounce. Haflard, haflard, haflady. And that haflard, haflady gave us the word landlord and lord of the manor. So lord and lady, the lord parts, haflard means the one who guards the bread, and haflady means the one who bakes it. This is for the British caste system. Note, I used that Portuguese word on purpose. It's the British caste system because the lords own the land and the slaves get paid in bread. And the Lord word is used where? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. It's all about the will. On earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, etc. So the Lord gives us our bread. The landlord, who is our connection to the supreme Lord, this is a fear-based, dominance-based system. And bread is what the Romans used to feed to the peasants so they didn't revolt. And it's the same thing the British fed to their peasants in the British caste system. Landlord. So now you see how inappropriate that is paired with Lord Krishna. It's Sri Krishna, not Lord Krishna. It's got nothing to do with bread. It's got everything to do with much higher considerations. And you know what they are. Now, to continue. So first, I took out all the colonial words, the Christian colonial terms. Next, and I could tell you amazing stories about each one of them that would make you laugh and wonder why people don't know. So I am now calling the Western civilization on this and saying, you are illiterate and don't even know the meaning and origin of the words you're using, what to speak of using them as substitutes for profound, meaningful Sanskrit words. No longer allowed. Okay? We're curing colonialism. Now, I want to tell you something candid, with no disrespect, but I've hardly met anyone from India who's comfortable speaking in English about their own culture. I have never met anyone who talks about the gunas or the doshas, if they're just a citizen. I have never met anyone who says Atma, they say soul. I have never met anyone who in a public conversation says samsara instead of reincarnation. And where does the word human come from? Oh, you know, it's bhumi, but the B was dropped. So from bhumi, mata bhumi, we get humi, and from that we get humus, the dirt that the earth is made up of, and we humans are made of that dirt. So humans is just the word bhumi. Well, not just. If you understand, then you bow to bhumi and say mata bhumi. Yasyam samudra bhuta sindurabo, yasyam bandam prashtaya sambhavu, from the Atharva Veda dedicated to mata bhumi. So we're humans. We're boomans. So here, the next thing was then, take out the one-to-word equivalency mistake and create a glossary of Sanskrit terms and leave 100 Sanskrit words in the verses of the English translation because there's no substitute. So in the course of the reading, the reader must learn 100 Sanskrit words to do what? To represent the Vedic worldview. And it is a view, isn't it? Because the word Veda gave us the word video because the word Veda means to see. That which allows you to see what is otherwise not visible. Right? Right. So what is a guide then? G-U-I-D-E. I want to show you a trick. G-U-I-D-E. Watch out for the German. The G of the guide means that this word came through the German and the When you see U, you should think V. So Guide. Think V-Day with a G in front of it. Gavide. And what is a guide? Someone who helps you to see. What is the word guide from? Vide, Veda, Vidya, all the same word. So even COVID, all these vid words and vade words. Now here's one you wouldn't have guessed. So what does the word federal mean? Well, F and V are interchangeable. Fa and va, yeah, labial fricatives. So federal, like the federal government, is from Vedaral, because Veda and Vidya went into Latin and shaped the word faith. It became Veda and Vidya, and then Vide, and then when it went into English, it became Fide, and Fide became faith, and federal is the government you put your blind faith in. So all the English language is just filled with Sanskrit. I'm writing another book about that, all the English words that are actually Sanskrit. So with the Bhagavad Gita, it was necessary to do two things: to insist that the reader learn 100 Sanskrit words, and to do a paragraph or almost a half-page definition of those words, so at least the primary meaning of those words is present for the reader. And they flip back and forth between the verse and the glossary definition. No other Bhagavad Gita has definitions that are longer than about 1 to 2 lines. And as you well know, you can't do justice to complex Sanskrit words that way. So by the way, the word guide, I call guru a seeing eye dog for the third eye impaired, for those without the Shastra Chakshus. In other words, the guru takes away your blindness through the Vide, through the Veda, and becomes your guide, Omagana. So, decolonized, debugged of English words that don't mean what they pretend to mean, only clear English used so it doesn't create another problem, 100 Sanskrit words intermingled, so you must use those words to describe what Bhagavan is describing. And that, last of all, there are no explanatory verses, statements in between the verses. It's just their conversation. It's 701, depending on who's counting, verses from start to finish, with no purports, no explanations in between. Because that stops anyone in their tracks. Most Bhagavad Gitas are this thick. The purports slow you down so much that nobody who doesn't already just know everything about it can read more than 2 verses or 3 verses, and they've read 10 pages and they quit. So I don't know anybody who's read the Bhagavad Gita all the way through. Just the translation all the way through. And that's what we've done. There is no explanation. So that means that the book doesn't have a sectarian perspective. It's not Shankara's version, or Ramanuja's version, or Madhva's version, or Nimbarka's version, or Vishnu Swami's version, or Chaitanya's version. It's just the Sanskrit. And so because of that, it's just the conversation. And because of that, it's radical. It's radical because the only people who did only the verses before were Penguin Press, who was making a complete mess of the whole thing. And all those books are what we read in college. I'd read 4 Bhagavad Gitas in college, and it didn't make any sense because they were all done as colonized versions, not by an acharya. But an acharya who doesn't know English well enough will keep on using colonizing words. They will put word for word equivalents with English, all of these pitfalls. So here's the bottom line. The reason this is radical is that the problem at this stage of history is that neither the government of Bharat, of India, nor its people are yet able to talk about themselves correctly in English. And so they say our Hindu faith, our Hindu religion, wrong, wrong. They use all of the wrong words, all the colonial words, our God or Godhead, and Bhagavan becomes God. And bending over backwards to please somebody, though that's in all the translations and the conversations. I have never spoken to someone from the Vedic community and in the conversation learned about the three gunas. Why not? How do you explain what to do and not to do without the three gunas? Because everyone's afraid to explain, because they still don't feel comfortable talking about their own culture with Sanskrit and mixing those Sanskrit words in and teaching their friends their meaning in English. And that is simply what this book represents. Not that I'm the brightest kid on the block and I made a better Gita than anyone else. I just cleaned it up as my service to all the rishis and gurus of the Vedic culture. This is the handbook. As far as I'm concerned, if you're doing Ashtanga yoga, you need the Ashtajaya of Panini. And if you're doing any yoga, you need the Bhagavad Gita. Everything else is there in the Vedic library. This doesn't supersede it. This is the handbook. Just like, you probably know this, but the Sikh Dharma, the Guru Granth started out as a guidebook for the eldest son of every Hindu family who became the Sikhs and protected Bharat. Only later did it become the Sikh religion. Do you believe? Is it a religion? Is it a cult? No. Cult comes from the Sanskrit kula. But none of this has been brought out. I insist that it come out while I'm still living. As far as possible, I am shining the light of Vedic Vidya on the linguistic errors in not understanding what English really means. So I'm going to tell you another interesting English word, heaven. Please tell me where heaven is. Which loka? How many lokas? Well, 14, if you follow the rishis, right? And we're number 8. And 2 lokas up, level 10, Svarga loka, then Jnana loka, etc. And eventually Satya loka, where Brahma and Saraswati reside, right? And then later down Patala and Vitala and Sutala and Talatala. Okay, so 14 lokas. 14 loka doesn't mean location exactly. It means dimension of material existence. Okay. But it's in chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavan explains, don't worry, Arjun. So if you leave your body fighting, anyone who does goes to Svargaloka. They go 2 lokas up. It's kind of like the Hawaii vacation of reincarnation. It's very lovely. It's beautiful. You're in a lovely place. There's none of the problems that Earth planets have, Earth Loka has. Okay. So then what does the word Christian heaven actually mean? Because it can't be synonymous with loka, because there's not 14 lokas in Christianity. There's no lokas. Loka in la cabeza. Loka means crazy in English. So heaven is an English word again from Scotland, because the Scottish word and English word for oats is Avon. In Scotland, the soil's not very good because the volcano scraped it off a couple 100,000 years ago. And so when they grow things, one of their crops is oats. Oats are a hardy crop and they grow well in that environment. When it's time to harvest the oats, they bring a sickle. They cut the oats down. They take a pitchfork and throw them up into a tall, tall wagon, which is called Heaven the Avon. You ready? So Heaven the Avon became heaven, and heaven means enough oatmeal for the winter. Now, would you like to go to heaven? So Christianity promises everyone they'll get enough oatmeal forever. They're going to Avon, haven. So just as the pundits insist that we pronounce, use the right roots, the right dhatus, that we know the Sanskrit and use the Sanskrit correctly so it doesn't drift. So everyone right now is a victim of linguistic drift in English. And that's about it. So with that, Ram, I'm going to hand it back to you for questions and anything else.
Thank you, Jeffreyji. It was quite interesting, enlightening, and quite eye-opening, because, I'm pretty much sure that no one has attempted such kind of translation earlier. Going back to, etymologies, and as you call it, a radical translation. So radical means going to the roots. Okay. So roots of English words, looking at their historical context, their sociological context, their religious context, and comparing it with what Sanskrit words are equivalent to it. And as you're saying that you don't have any equivalent words in Sanskrit. So you have to understand Sanskrit word also by going through its etymological roots. And that's not an easy exercise, because first of all, you need to have command over both languages in its totality, historical perspective. And that's why your radical translation is the first decolonizing attempt to understand our text. It's like decolonization of Hindu mind through radical translation, if I'm not wrong.
You are right. And it is not
Okay,
only radical.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, I want to hear what you're saying.
No, I was saying that, this decolonization is very much needed at this time, because our intelligentsia is still controlled by all Western notions, Western ideas. And if you can teach them that, this Western foundation, Western intelligentsia has its root in English vocabulary. And if vocabulary has something different meaning, which what they are assuming to be, then it's a radical shock for them. It's breaking their world apart. Okay. And that is very important, to bring back them to the original and native or indigenous understanding of what our Shastras are.
Absolutely. And let me just give you one easy way to think of this. According to linguistics, there are two kinds of words: skinny words and fat words. Skinny word, here. Although there's a couple of objects that resemble this is mouse. Now, that's actually musika in Sanskrit. So what an interesting coincidence, so to speak, that the English word mouse is from the Sanskrit musika, and that mouse now has another meaning. So these words are slippery and elusive. There's a principle in this then, and that is that it's literally, this is called framing. So when you put a frame around someone, you describe them in a certain way, and the frame sticks. Linguists know this. They know that when you frame them a certain way, the frame sticks, and if you oppose the frame and say, no, I'm not that, the frame gets tighter. Instead, you have to reframe and change the frame. I did a little of that earlier with the caste system, didn't I? Because the British have a marvelous caste system to this day. And they're not about to let go of it. And the whole Catholic Church had a caste system. It said if anyone's not a Christian and has skin of a different color, I'll tell you the Latin for that is called persona non grata. Now in everyday English, that means somebody's not welcome in your social circle. You want to know the actual meaning? It means they look like a human, but they're not human. So according to Western civilization, all of the indigenous people just looked like humans. They really weren't. And so they could take whatever they wanted and do whatever they want to them. That's still the worldview for those of you with brown skin. Brown skin also points off. And blacks. And black problem has been haunting America from day one. Why? Because it wasn't a democracy. It was a slavery-based colonial system. So right now is the first time in history we've started clearing these things up. So radical is also from, and so here's my secret, Shraddha. Shraddha is not faith. Shraddha is a state of certainty that comes from your adhikari over many lifetimes. Adhikari is what the guru looks for in the student to know what to share with them. And adhikari and Shraddha both imply samsara. Many, many lifetimes of learning. And finding out what your level of learning is and addressing that is what the gurus do to know how to teach their students. And they do it by asking the students questions till they know their adhikari, which is also their Shraddha. It means their level of seeing directly, which is what a rishi is, isn't it? It means they see the mantras that they hear. So the etymology, the nirukta, is the key to this whole thing. The rest of Sanskrit follows after it. 50 letters in the alphabet, 26 in English, 22 in Hebrew. No comparison. Strict linguistic rules. My professor of Sanskritam had memorized all 4,000 of the grammatical rules of the Ashtadhyayi Panini. Now that's Pandita. But if you'd asked him what conveys the meaning so that everyone should know so, it's first and foremost the nirukta. This is what the Indian community needs to do. Go back to their etymological roots, teach their children, all the Hindu youth, outside of school, because the schools will not teach it because they're against it. They won't even use the correct words to describe the colonization of India, what to speak of its actual teachings. So the Vedic community needs to start doing this, to train the youth and train anyone who's in public and who's going to describe their culture in what words not to use and what words to use. And get a vocabulary of 100 or so Sanskrit words and all use those words in a similar way. That uniformity will change the frame. Because so far, no one in the Hindu community is initiating the rest of the world into their culture, except a few gurus. And this is what you need to do. You need to add words to the conversation and say, these words are absolutely necessary to understand our culture. This is what Dharma is. So what is Dharma? Think of what you would say to someone outside your culture if they say, what is Dharma? Would you say it's like religion? What's the root of the word Dharma? Dri. What does that mean? Well, what's the English equivalent of Dri? How about the essential nature of a thing which if you take it away, that thing is no longer itself? Pretty close. So that means the Dharma of something is how it should be used. And this leads to Swadharma, Sanatan Dharma, always true. And Swadharma is what explains the so-called caste system. It's not that. It's a Varna system. And a Varna system is what you're good at. Is using someone according to what they're good at, which is their Swadharma. So education should establish someone's Swadharma through a series of means, train them in a certain skill set, then that person becomes a part of the social body, become the head, or the arms, or the stomach, or the legs. Do you know anyone who's teaching it this way? I don't. Why? because of lack of mastery of this problem. So if we start right there, I will go so high as to say, and I love them all, but everybody in the current government of India who are working diligently on behalf of Bharat do not know how to do what we're describing right now. So honestly, what I'd like to do is go right to the top, give them a seminar, show them that this is true, prove it, and have them convert, and now actually know what words to avoid and use. Do the same thing, put it on the road, teach it to all the Hindu youth, so they have ammunition to disarm the conversation with their English teachers in the school systems. In a non-adversarial way, just say, look it up. Here's the dictionary. I'm writing a book right now of the Sanskrit words that everyone needs to know. That's my next book. So this is the next step in the Cultural Revolution, which is a non-violent, non-political cleaning up of how we talk about the Vedic civilization in the English language. That is radical.
Absolutely correct. And that reminds me of Confucius' quote on language. I think probably you have heard of this. That if language is not correct, then what is said is not what is meant. If what is said is not what is meant, then what must be done remains undone. If this remains undone, morals and art will deteriorate. If justice goes astray, the people will stand about in helpless confusion. So this is something Confucius wrote almost 2600 years back. And that's why we have a lot of focus on language training, even out of 6 Vedangas, that 4 are focused on language training.
Absolutely.
So traditionally we have given importance to language the most as compared to any other discipline.
That's a wonderful explanation, Ram, and all the more ironic that we haven't applied it yet. And isn't it even more ironic that without the Vedic civilization, technology would not be where it is in the world today? There's no question about it. Not only because binary mathematics was derived from the Rig Veda, and that without that there'd be no Boolean logic and Boolean algebra and nothing of what we call technology, but mostly because the workforce, the brilliant Jnani workforce that made technology possible was the brain drain of India. And in a certain sort of a way, a continued colonization. And what's the problem is now technology is being used as an agent of concentrating wealth. So in the last 20 years, we've seen this going on, and perhaps in the last 2 years, even further. It's hard to see it otherwise. The wealth is getting into a smaller and smaller number of hands, and those people are not concerned with the sustainability of our planet. And yet the sustainability of Matabhumi is the basis of the Vedic civilization. This is Dharma, back to Dharma. So the Sanatan Dharma leads everyone to learn what is their Svadharma, what is their guna, what is their prakriti, what is their dosha. And this leads to preventive medicine rather than emergency and invasive medicine. All of these things rest on the same concept, and all of that rests upon one important notion, that the Atma is immortal, and that immortality means the universe, and this is something I invented, is a university. Adhikari is your grade in the university, K through PhD. I've never heard anyone from India explain their culture this way. And simply say where the Atma can't be burned, can't be, it's pretty clear in the Gita, isn't it? Dehi no smin yata dehe komaram yovanam jara. Couldn't get much plainer. I've never heard anyone from India quote that verse to somebody who's not from India. So why is that not happening? Why is it that the culture that has the most sophisticated programming language is the least adept at talking about themselves? Perhaps they think it's too complicated. and that they can't share it. Perhaps they think it's been so abused, if they share more, it'll get worse. I don't think it can get much worse, though, but it can get a lot better, the better all representatives of Bharat are in talking about the fundamental principles of what? The Vedic world view.
So I have one question right now. It's related to confusion among a practitioner of Sanatan Dharma and confusion among English audience. So when you interact with both, because you are living in Canada and you interact English audience, you come India and you interact with people here who are more confused about when they read Indian scripture. I'm saying that because Indians are more colonized in the sense that they don't know about anything about their scripture at this point. So who have more honesty in exploring things at this point of time?
I think they're neck and neck in a very difficult, may I call it a race? If you think of it this way, though, there obviously are coconuts. And then you know the dilemma. So this means white on the outside or white on the inside? What does this imply? Just think about it. What's the karma for being a colonizer? Take birth as a confused participant in the culture you just colonized. So if you were going to punish the British, but it's not punishment, it's just karma, then you would have them take birth in the culture they just colonized, wouldn't you? Just like if you wanted someone, I'll tell you a little secret. My father fought in World War II. He was an Air Force pilot at age 19, stationed in Mumbai. Think of this, I'm his eldest son. When I was in the ashram, I called him up and said, Dad, you were in the Air Force, right? Stationed in India? He said, yeah. I said, did you swim in any rivers? He said, yeah, the Ganga or something like that. I said, yeah, the Ganga. And I said, did you go to any temples? Yeah. He said, did you eat anything while you were at the temple? Yeah. He said, prasad or something like that. Now, what do you think would be the benediction that the Brahmin in a Vishnu temple somewhere in Mumbai would give to a young 19-year-old American who comes innocently into the temple? He'd give him a bite of prasad and say, may you have a son devoted to Vishnu. Everyone keeps forgetting that we're all switching bodies from life to life in various strategic ways. Some unconsciously, some very consciously, and that we really are not the vehicle. We are the Atma. And I just want to say to you, I have never heard anyone from India, stone cold, unless it's a guru, someone just who's teaching, but just stone cold say, well, here's the first word you need to know. Atma. Oh, really? What does that mean? Well, that's you. And this clothing is not you, is it? No, it's not. Then this body's also not you, isn't it? I've never heard any everyday person from Bharat who does believe these things start the conversation by changing the frame. Oh, you guys believe in the caste system. Well, actually, we can't. Why not? Well, because Adhikari, we look to see what the person's level of evolution is. And that's got nothing to do with the color of their body or the gender of their body or the age of their body. It's like clothing. Do you judge people just by their clothing? Not if you're smart. Then here's your new word. Now you'll begin to understand us. This means I see your Atma. Not only that, I bow to it. Namaste. Ah, 2 words I have never been taught by anyone from Bharat in my first, second, third, or fourth encounter. But they'll say our Hindu religion, etc., etc. So really, it's not that hard to fix. The people who don't care won't care. And then you know they were probably British in their previous life. And they've come back to be a little bit tortured by being the culture that they colonized.
Namaste, Jeffrey ji. Thank you for that wonderful talk. Just to reminding us of our own deracination from our roots. As Ramji rightly pointed out, we are so cut off from our roots that all this is having to come from people who have come from the West and learnt all this. So thank you for that. My question is, do you think it is necessary or even possible for Sanskrit to be mainstreamed as a language? It is no more mainstream usage. Nobody speaks it anymore. And one of the reasons for probably cutting off is the fact that all of us have our mother tongues. And even that is slowly getting, it is disappearing among even the middle class, where the middle class speaks a lot of English and less of their own mother tongue. So Sanskrit is a very far cry. I have read that Bhartrhari's Vakyapadiyam says that speaking Sanskritam in itself can get you moksha, and that it encapsulates the culture of this land. So in that context, do you think it is a possibility that we can bring back Sanskritam as a mainstream language? And do you think it is necessary for us to connect back to these words in the right context to know the etymology?
Right. Well, there's an old saying that I'm fond of. It is in like a pin, out like a plow. Think about it. This is a strategic saying. Go in like a pin, come out like a plow. So you see, what is necessary is that some words that do not exist in English simply be dumped into English, because no English words represent those meanings. Meaning, you cannot program without those words a certain outcome. The outcome is called yoga. What does Patanjali say at the very beginning, first 4 sutras? Aside from Atha Yoga Anushashanam, he says the whole secret. Yogas, Chit, Vritti, Nirodha. So what are the vrittis? Well, it gives you the word vortex in English and all the twisted words. Guess what the biggest vritti word in English is? You'll laugh. Advertising. Advertising is giving people vrittis without their knowing it. It's sticking twisted little ideas in their head without them even seeing them go in. And later on, those vrittis force the person, you will buy this car, you will buy this product, you will buy, they're vrittis. So asuras plant vrittis in your head to get your money or to get your business. But those are the vrittis, because everything here is twisted by orbits and twisted by so many things. Yogas chit vritti nirodha. Now, there is no English word, even twisted, even vortex isn't like vritti, because ritam is the basis of vritti. And the ritam is the laws of nature. So let me tell you a secret. A few years back, during the Renaissance in Europe, 2 things happened. William Shakespeare invented 1,000 words because English just didn't have them. And seeing the need for them, all of the scientific knowledge, terminology in English right now is just Latin. So about 2,000 Latin words were simply dumped into English. This is my forearm. What's the medical name for it? What's the Latin name for it? Extensor digitorium profundus, Latin. Now, do you know anyone who speaks Latin in everyday conversation? I don't. But they do. They're called MDs. MDs have a vocabulary of 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 Latin words. And you can't read a medical journal without learning 200 or 300 Latin words. Well then, why can't we get 200 or 300 Sanskrit words into a language that doesn't have any of those words? Into a language that isn't even able to talk about the things that the Sanskrit words are. That's why I told you about fat and skinny words. This is a pen. In Spanish, it's la pluma. In French, it's something else. In German, it's something else. It's a skinny word, doesn't matter. So you can borrow skinny words from other languages. English is great at that. There are literally a million or so or more, huge number of English words that we just colonized, taken from other places, from each different language and just pulled in. They're object words, not meaning words. Because the Abrahamic religions, especially Christianity, that have been dominating the Western world, do not want terminology that threatens its worldview. It's very simple. Let me be clear. That's the reason why it hasn't happened. And now that there are how many yogis out in the world that are not from India? Oh, I don't know, a couple 100 million? Karma or what? Couple 100 million female yogis. So why don't we take them all out and shoot them? Well, because we would look really bad if we took a couple 100 million women out on the streets and shot them for doing what? Practicing the vidya of Bharat called yoga. Yogascha vritti nirodha. In no time at all, they'll be achieving samadhi and dharana through their asana and pranayama. There's no other word in English for those things. So this is how you do it. In like a pin, out like a plow. Learn 100, let's make it fun, 108 Sanskrit words that are crucial for doing what? Describing the Vedic worldview. That's why Veda means to see. With those words, you can introduce your culture to others and say, you don't have a word for this, that's why I'm teaching you this one. There's no Latin word for this, no Greek word for this. There's a Sanskrit word for this. So if you don't mind, I'll give you the word that we use for this thing for which there is no English word. So it's a soft thing. I like to say, not by coercion, not by conversion, just by conversation. The revolution is going to go on by conversation. And there are millions of yogis. Right now, I'll tell you what, if all the ladies in the Hindu community went to the yoga studios throughout the world and said, we'd like to teach you cooking, Ayurvedic style, Indian cooking, so you know how to make more healthy things for your body. You think they would send them away and say, go away, we don't like Hindus? They'd say, we're so honored and touched that you would come to teach us. So, ladies, make this your seva. And while you're at it, teach them 20 Sanskrit words. Oh, that's samsara. What is samsara? That. Oh, okay, I get it. You mean like reincarnation? Well, no, not exactly. But yeah, similar. But it's samsara. It means swimming together through the ocean of matter. Oh, okay, I get it. See, no one's doing this. So it's really easy. Make yourself user-friendly. You already are. You're so user-friendly, you don't explain yourself. Or you use borrowed Christian terms so you don't offend anyone. But no one will be offended if you teach them the Sanskrit word. No one reasonable. And they'll say, that was interesting. Yeah, I saw that one on TV the other day. Are there more of those? I'd like to have a little bigger vocabulary. They'll be hungry. They'll ask you. So don't go in, here's your 108 words you have to learn today. Go in and say, oh, we call that gunas. We call that the doshas. We call that this. We call that this. We call that this. Oh, I'm starting to catch on. Christianity will be shaking in its boots, going, no, this is horrible. No, don't teach them those things. We don't want them to know. Well, not all Christians. Tell you what, the latest statistics say 80% of Christians are leaning toward or already believe in samsara, reincarnation. Why? Well, because you can accept some things from a religion and then say it's missing some vitamins. After all, have you ever told someone who has a religion, you know nothing? No, you know better. You'd say, oh, that's nice. So what do you do next? Explain the difference between a dharma and a religion. Okay, they go. That's interesting. So you mean everything has a dharma? That's right. It's the particular dharma of that thing. It's the scientific way you should be using it. What happens if you go against its dharma? Oh, you get pop. What happens if you use it the right way? You get punya. Well, what does pop bring you? Oh, dukkha. Put up your dukes. Pain. And what does punya give you? Sukha. That's where we got sugar from. See how easy it is? I don't know anyone from India who plays this game.
Right.
Teach your children to play this game.
I think this, 108 words is a very practical target. And in fact, if we go by one word daily, I think it's achievable. And I think in this note, Arjun has also shared one shlok with us from Patanjali. Arjun, can you please go ahead with its proper recitation?
Okay, it says, Ekah Shabdah Suprayuktah Samyak Gyatah Swarge Loke Cha Kamaduk Bhavati. That is, even if one word is correctly, it is known and it is correctly used, it leads to Kamdhuk in Swarg as well as in this loka. So he is highlighting the importance of using correct words in his introduction to the grammar in the Mahabhashya. So,
Wonderful.
Thank you, Arjun, for sharing this. This is quite important.
Send it to me, Arjun. That's wonderful. And I'll just add something to it. So if you're not careful, what happens with the perfection of Sanskritam is that you get caught in too much detail and lose the practical sense of what needs to be done next. So advanced knowledge is useful, except it can make you lose perspective. So here's the secret. Adhikari, educare, education. Adhikari means discerning the level of evolution of the person you're speaking with and feeding them the next appropriate idea of learning. Then adhikari became educare in the Greek, which means bringing out what is inside, similar but not quite right. And education in the English means piling a bunch of data on top of someone, no matter who they are. You see the entropy in the word? How it slid downhill as it went first to the Greeks, then to English. And now education is not at all like adhikari. You just dump the same information on top of people and call it education. You'll know that this problem with language is hurting everyone the most in the educational system because the school board, the National School Board Association in America, is situated in Texas and California. And they have been resisting for years to change the textbooks so that the Vedic culture is represented correctly. It's the same fight. If India can teach the world to reprogram computers, then they can teach the world to reprogram their own intelligence and be able to speak correctly about Bharat. You can do it, anyone can do it, a few words at a time.
Hello, sir. So that was wonderful. I just had you were talking about how your next project is on tracing back English words with Sanskrit roots. I was just wondering if there is any text for now where we can, refer back to understand English words and how they have, etymologically developed from Sanskrit, words or dhwani for now as a, as a part of the initiation process.
Yes.
That's an important question, actually. Thank you for that. Right. The thing to know is there are two kinds of dictionaries when it comes to language, other than the Sanskrit language. In the Sanskrit language, everything is based upon its roots. Other languages, and especially English, have what are called usage dictionaries. This is what we're used to calling a dictionary. And then there are etymological dictionaries. And etymology traces the word back to its roots as best it can. But here's a secret. The Oxford University, because it was the British instrument of colonizing the world, and especially Bharat, their etymological dictionary only goes back to Greek and not all the way to Sanskrit. So my own research into this was inhibited by the lack of reputable etymological dictionaries until I found one particular one. And that one is called Origins by an author named Eric Partridge. He was Australian. He's no longer alive. His dictionary is big. It's yay thick. And it traces the etymology back to Sanskrit rather than stopping at Greek. So that etymological dictionary, Origins, by that author, will take you back and into the territory where you watch a word be traced back to German, then traced back to this, and then traced back to its other root, and then go back here, and that's how it was used. Let me give you a simple example. In the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the word Priya is used 7 times. And in the last verses of that chapter, almost 5 times in a row. Very close to each other. Anyone who does this, Bhagavan says, very Priya to me. This and that, very Priya to me. The Sanskrit word Priya became the English word free. And it also became the English word privy, as in privy to, meaning only certain people are told this, meaning a special relationship or privacy. So privacy, was Priya, in one case spawned a group of English words that are almost directly like the original. In the second case, the P became F, which, as I told you, pa, ba, fa. It happens very easily. So then the word free, aka moksha, free is English trying to say moksha, but not knowing what is becoming free. The Atma freed from the bondage of matter. So moksha is a kind of freeing. We can use it to help, but it's not the full meaning, because we have to have Atma and Prakriti and Brahman and a whole series of other words to now explain moksha. So the sequencing of learning the correct Sanskrit words and learning to see the backward movement of them, like I said to you about advertising, vert, vritti. So twistedness of all forms, I have an aversion to it. Why? It twists me, and so on. So English is filled with Sanskrit. I'm writing one book about that. Then I'm simply defining the Sanskrit words correctly, so they're used correctly in English, with no colonized words involved. And then the last thing is English words that were used to colonize the world and why they shouldn't be used. So all of these linguistic problems should be the business of those trying to unframe Bharat. Bharat's been framed, and only using language, as Ram so usefully shared Confucius's saying, we're literally reprogramming the world with words. So what I like to say is, world is words. And ask the Abrahamics. I think they must have gotten it from something Vedic, don't you think? Ekubahonam yovedadati kaman. In the beginning was the word, but they don't say what the word was. We know, don't we? It was Omkara. Aham Brahmasmi.
How would you recommend that somebody begin to learn Sanskrit? Would you recommend we learn the letters, the alphabet? I mean, start from like the smallest bytes, or just learn the words and embody those words in our lives as much as possible?
Yeah, it's an important question. Thank you. Well, first of all, in my opinion, the meanings are more immediate. And so it depends on the person's adhikari. It depends on their dedication, their willingness to dedicate time and energy to learning. I said to you earlier that my professor of Sanskritam was raised in Benares as the child of a family of Benares Pundits. And his father, actually, he told me this. He said, my father used to give me 8 rupees for every rule of grammar that I would memorize. So he memorized all 4,000. I suspect he was a fairly well-off teenager. Now, for most people, that's a daunting task. So if we start with grammatical rules, it's a bit much. If we start with meaning, I think that's the starting point. And probably the next is phonetics, so that the sound is right, as close as one can get. But if you're teaching someone from down in Texas, you're still going to go hum sarvasi prabho matuk sarvam pravartate. They're going to mess up Sanskrit like they do English. So if they don't have a pretty clear English accent, you'll find that getting them to speak proper Sanskrit will be very difficult. So I would go for the correct etymology, the correct nirukta, and the correct grammar as the 2 starting points. And the chanting will come next to them, and poetry will probably come last. So the poetry was also necessary when especially it was an oral culture, because the memorization of something requires that it be in the poetic format. Hence the Gayatri is a meter and not just a mantra, but there are Gayatri metered mantras of various sorts. There's a Vishnu Gayatri, there's a Saraswati Gayatri, etc. But the Gayatri meter is the poetics. So I'd save the poetics as a nicety for later on. I would start with the meaning of the words, then go to their correct pronunciation, because then they can be used for mantra chanting and for various shlokas and verses and so forth. And then the grammatical rules are necessity according to how much the person's going to learn. But honestly, most people aren't going to learn the complete language. Most people are going to add it to their vocabulary. So out of necessity, I start with that. I know that if Shakespeare can invent 2,000 words, or 1,000 words, and if the culture can dump 2,000 Latin words in, then the Hindu community could dump a couple of hundred Sanskrit words into English in no time. They just have to take it on and say, we're going to teach these words and their meaning to the world. That's our response to being misunderstood. So I believe that's the starting point. And if you take that on also, that revolution will move through your generation very powerfully.
Namaste. Thank you, Jeffrey ji, for the wonderful talk. It was very nice to hear you. I think you pointed out very lucidly that there are problems and challenges in translating the texts because we don't have the exact equivalents in English, of course, because of the cultural differences. And also because of there are etymological problems in English words themselves. I think that is something which people don't know about. So my question is that are there reference works that deal with self-critical use of English words, for example, within the English language culture itself? Because it's not just a problem of translating Indian or Sanskrit texts, but also of other ancient cultures. So I mean, my question is this, first of all, is there any other parallel that you see in other ancient cultures that are trying to deal with this problem of translation? And secondly, is there a self-critical reference or a repository of English language culture itself that is trying to point out these problems within English language?
Yes, not so very much. This is a new field. And the consequence is that it's also a wide open field. But the dilemma is that so far, I want to tell you honestly, when I start explaining to people who speak English, I'll ask them the meaning of what to them they think is an obvious word. What does that word mean? And they think they know in a sort of general sense, but no one's ever asked them the actual meaning. Sorry about that. It's the third time I've turned it off. We live in an electronic age. So The problem is that there is no definitive etymological enterprise that I know of that is going on at this time. Partly because English, it's at the embarrassment of English. This is what I started to say. That when I ask someone who speaks English what a particular word means, I'll give you a simple example. So what is the Vatican actually come from? Well, let me give you a hint. There's a basilica there. Okay? And a basilica in the Vatican. How interesting. And the Pope sits on a square seat called a cathedral in a place called a cathedral. And the cathedral came from cathedra, and hedron is a square seat. And basilica is from Basel, and Basel is Tulsi. And Vatican is Vatican, just pronounced differently. So, has anyone ever told you this? In the Vatican, there's a basilica, and the Pope sits on a cathedra, in a cathedral, a cathedral. Katha what? Krishna Katha? Christ Katha? The Katha is the same, right? So if you ask someone, so where will I look for these words? Well, where will you look? What's the name of the book that you'll look in? Dictionary. Oh, you mean like Diksha? Yeah, that's right. So dictionary is Diksha. It's not an English word. And then if you memorize the dictionary, you'll have a very large what? Vocabulary. Bach. Bach. So you'll be like Saraswati because you'll now be able to give Diksha because of the dictionary. These words are hidden everywhere. I'll give you one more example. The word student. Think about it. What would you say student is? You say someone who's learning. It's stuti anta. Stuti anta. Do you know what a stuti is? Yes. What about anta? Oh, okay. The end toward which the stuti is taking you. It's called a student. Stuti anta. The professor is helping the student to see what the end goal of the learning is and to take them on that journey. All of these are Sanskrit. There are thousands of Sanskrit words intermingled. And no one wants to talk about this. This is the dirty laundry as far as the Western world is concerned, because this is going to prove conclusively. If this book was spoken some 7,000, 8,000 years ago, and Sanskrit is in this text, and the Vedas is a library of Sanskrit, and if we know for sure, and we do from other etymologists, that Greek and Latin and all the Russian languages, you know that Russia is from the word Rishi. It's where the Rishis used to go and build ashrams. How about Scandinavia? Well, that's Skanda. What does transcendental mean? Transcendere. It means to leap beyond. Who leaps beyond? Skanda, the son of Shiva and Durga. And what about Aryan land? I mean, Ireland. Aryan land is Aryan land. All these words are present. No one is addressing them because it's the dirty secret of the Western civilization, and it's the secret that Vedic civilization not only came first, but is the grandmother and teacher of the world for thousands of years along the Silk Road. So this, I would propose to you, reprogramming the world is the next job for the brilliant intellects and jnanis and all the brilliant professors of Sanskrit and Vedic knowledge. If the whole culture turns their mind to this in a couple of years, my beginning works will look like kindergarten and the whole thing will be sorted out. In fact, I'd like to challenge the Vedic community or invite them to join me and invite people to get behind this project with some finances. Let's see if in a few years we can revolutionize the way the culture is seen. and show the linguistic pathway that's been followed all throughout the languages of Europe. We know that Sanskrit's the basis of German, but no one has taken the trouble to show the implications of that. We know that 60% of Russian is Sanskrit, and there's so much more. So why don't we do something about it together?
From an academic perspective, when you trace etymology of some word, and if we look into dictionary, they are not same in the sense that might be they stop at one point of time. This could be one reason, but isn't it also the reason that we are also eager to connect words based on sound rather than etymologically tracing it to its proper roots? So does that also happen? Like language enthusiasts, because of their they would like to see deeper connection between words, so they try to connect similar sounding words and say that these are connected, though historically they might not be connected or etymologically they might not be connected. So are they two different disciplines? They overlap, or something more is required to connect these words?
Yes, thank you, Ram. That's a very important question. And these are generally called folk etymologies, meaning they're at a gossipy kind of level rather than at the level of solid scholarship. So I can only say, first of all, that because universities like Oxford did not want to reveal the Sanskrit roots, this is obfuscated. This has created a confusion around this that was purposeful. So it will take a few years of searching through documents and of getting groups of people to apply their minds and intellects, their buddhi, to this as a process. So we do have to be careful not to accept just any etymological gossip as true etymology. And if I'm guilty of that in any of the words that I'm using, I may be influenced by dictionary makers who also made mistakes. So it's got to be the case that true dictionary making is a large group effort with everybody looking over everyone's shoulder and making sure that there's sufficient evidence. It is still a science. There's a lovely book, though. Someone asked earlier if there were any good books. And the book is called Mouse or Rat, Translation as Negotiation. Author's name will come to me in a moment. He's deceased now, but it's a very good example of this because in European languages, many of them, there's one word for both mouse and rat. So this particular book shows us that when translation is taking place, there may not even be a word for a particular word in another language. And as a result, because it was unpopular to pursue this up until now, Umberto Eco is the author of that book. Umberto Eco, an Italian, if I remember correctly. And it's Mouse or Rat, Translation as Negotiation. If there was a rat in your child's nursery, you'd be worried. If there was a mouse, you wouldn't be worried. So it's important whether it's mouse or rat. This level of precision is crucial to linguistic and etymological work. All the better that we have a team. But because it does lend itself to some humor, so I'm going to use a little humor here now. Since Oxford was the university that did intentionally subvert the truth in supporting the British colonization of India and the world, and I have to tell you what the word Oxford means. Ox, of course, means a bull, and ford means the crossing of a river. So Oxford University was built where the oxen used to cross the river. So you do have to be careful that Oxford doesn't sell you a load of bull. Because where the oxen cross the river, there's bullshit. So Even Oxford has been lying to us. So it's going to take a little while to sort this out, and I'm a pioneer, and I will never say that everything I say is right. I will say it's a few crumbs on the trail to the ultimate knowing. And if I had $100 million and a team of scholars, both English and Sanskrit and of other languages, we could really do something. It's better spent money than chasing a rocket to Mars, as far as I'm concerned. I'd rather know the ultimate truth of our origins and to get a deeper understanding of how to communicate higher and noble truths than I would send a few lonely, unhappy astronauts to Mars. So maybe Elon Musk will help us out, or someone like him, with our etymological project. It's just as radical.
So definitely an extension to this only, along with etymology and language understanding, how much sadhana helps us in decoding words for meaning of words? Because you are sadhak, you have been practicing, Vedanta and all that. So how they combine together, and how much it is important for those who are studying language?
I'll give you a small example of this, but of course, manas trayate. The manas is a slippery friend, and we are manusya, we're the humans, but we can get lost in the minutiae or in a variety of other things. So manas is a hall of mirrors until it's steadied, and the mantras of the Vedic tradition are exactly for that purpose. My professor of Sanskrit, the one I told you had memorized the Ashtadhyayi, all 4,000 grammatical rules, I once said to him, I'm a little lonely because there are not many white boys from Detroit, Michigan who are pursuing Vedic knowledge and Vedanta and Sanskrit and so on. And I said, so, it's sort of a existential journey of my own. And he said, well, why don't I give you a mantra that was chanted by the Pandavas, specifically Yudhishthira, when the Pandavas went into exile. And the story goes that Yudhishthira was so upset because as Kshatriyas, they were always feeding those in need. And he knew he wasn't worried for them. He knew he wouldn't be able to feed everyone while he was out wandering in the forest with no resources. So his guru said, well, then I'm going to give you this pot that's made of copper, and I'm going to give you a mantra, which is the 108 names of the sun. And if you chant the mantra every day, then Draupadi, whatever she cooks in that pot, will feed an unlimited number of people until she eats in the evening. And if you'll pardon me, I won't chant all of it, but my pronunciation is not that which it should be. But this mantra I've been chanting since 1980 when it was given to me, every day, all day, throughout the day, as one of the many mantras. And it's the 108 names of Surya that Yudhishthira was given by Daumya, his guru and family Purohit. Surya Aryaman Bhagatvastar Pushan Arka Savita Ravi Prabhasi Maharaja Kala Mrityu Datar Prabhakara Prithvi Apas Tejaska Vayu Parayana Soma Brihaspati Shukra Buddha Angaraka Indra Vivasvat. I won't go on and become tedious, but I love it. And it brings me back into the company of the rishis and to the company of my great Pandit and Guru who introduced me to Sanskritam, and of the many acharyas that I learned from, so that I feel at the same moment both small and elevated and enlightened and made better by their darshan, by the drishti that is given to me. So just as Veda means to see, so the drishti that comes from Vedic mantras, properly received from a guru, are the lifesavers. So I am living evidence of a famous saying, Muchi hoy, suchi hoy, Judy Krishna Baji. Suchi hoy Muchi hoy, Judy Krishna Tyaji. It's all in our tapasya. Tapasya, svadhyaya, ishvara pranidan, kriya yogaha. There's so much to say always in a Vedic conversation. I try to keep it succinct and useful so that we can do two things: sustain ourselves and our culture, and slowly, with love and respect, turn the violent political situation of the world towards the balance of monasteries.